Hello and welcome, everybody. This is a bit of a mic check for myself. And we will be getting started for our At Home with Nature, or At Home in Your Classroom. Today we're going to be talking about soils, and we are going to be starting in 5. We're going to pass it along to Raya in 4. We're going to learn about so much fun stuff today in 3, and I'll just count down 2. And Raya, why don't you take us away and tell us a bit about what we are talking about today?
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be joining you through the screens in your virtual classrooms. My name is Raya, and I am a teacher with Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. Let's see if you can see that on my shirt there. Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. That word conservation is really the most important word in our whole title. So let's think about what that means. Conserve. What does conserve mean? Well, I'm going to give you a hint. If you are turning off the light when you leave a room, for instance, you are conserving energy. If you turn the tap off while you brush your teeth, you are conserving water. So what do you think conserve might mean? If you're allowed to chat with your teachers in your own classroom, you can put it in your own classroom's chat. But you might have guessed already, conserve is kind of to save and not use up. So at the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, the TRCA, we are trying to conserve the environment and keep the environment healthy, and not, we want to kind of save it so that it can be healthy for a very, very, very long time. So that is who we are. We have also Will joining us today, and he's backstage. Say hi, Will.
Hello, everybody. Super excited to be here today.
All right, Will is going to join us a little bit later if there are questions. And then we have a few folks on the back end as well, Jasmine and Carly, helping to answer some questions in the chat. So speaking of the chat, if you have questions, you can let your teacher know, and your teacher can put it right into the chat. Some of them will be answered in the chat, and some of them will be answered at the very end. I can answer them through the live stream. So let's start thinking about soil a little bit. I want you to think about what you had for lunch today, or breakfast or lunch. What did you eat today? I had a salad, so I had a lot of lettuce in there. I put some cheese in my salad too. And when I started thinking about the tomatoes and the lettuce and the seeds and nuts that I had in my salad, well, those were from plants that grew from the ground. When I think about the cheese, well, that came from a cow, and the cow ate grains and wheat, and the grains and wheat grew from the ground. And so today we're going to be talking about that important stuff that's actually in the ground that all those plants grow from. We're talking about soil. And you might be thinking, we're talking about dirt. Perfect. I'm going to tell you, soil and dirt, not the same thing. Dirt is like what I have on my pants when I wipe my pants clean. But soil is a really important habitat that has all kinds of amazing good stuff in it that we'll be talking about today. And soil, like we just talked about with our food, it's so important so that we can actually grow food and we can have beautiful surroundings. And the food isn't only for us, the food's for other animals as well, non-human animals, right? Okay, so when we're thinking about what's in that soil and stuff that we could be eating up, well, how does soil become soil? Things get broken down to make that soil. So I've got some leaves here. And these leaves, maybe you can hear them crunching. These leaves, when they land on the ground in the fall, then they will eventually decompose and decay and become soil. They get broken down into tiny, tiny bits. And that's great. The soil needs the nutrients that are in the leaves and the twigs and sticks that get broken down. Other things that can break down into smaller and smaller bits could be like a banana peel or maybe an apple core. So different things that we eat, the parts that we don't eat, can be broken down into little bits in the soil. Now, this doesn't mean that if you are eating from an apple tree, an apple that grew on a tree, and there were banana peels that went to decay into the soil, it's not like you're eating suddenly banana tasting apples. That's not how it works. The banana peel actually breaks into really, really tiny, tiny bits. So tiny. It's really just the nutrients that end up in the soil. Now, leaves, banana peels, apple cores, other food, things that are decaying in the soil, those are all good things that we want in our soil. But there could also be things that go in the soil that aren't so good. Like, for instance, if somebody was to pour, accidentally they spilled their chemical window cleaner in the soil, would you want to eat food from a garden where there were chemicals in the soil? Some of the chemical stuff maybe could end up making the food not so healthy. Now, there's a lot more to it. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we today are going to be talking about like healthy soil. So we're not talking about soil that has a bunch of chemicals. We're talking about soil that has been produced by decaying good natural organic things. All right. When I mentioned about breaking down and decaying, I didn't really talk about how that happens. I would like to show you a video that shares some of the little creatures that are so important to help break things down in soil. Will, can you show the log flipping video?
Absolutely, Raya.
Excellent. So girls and boys, I was out on a trail a little while back. You can see there's snow on the ground. And I saw a really cool log. And so I carefully flipped it over because I wanted to see who was living underneath, helping to decay the log and break it down. And there were some worms, there was centipedes down there, there were some little beetles. And as we move along in this decaying log area, we can see there are some, all those little bits, granular bits there, those are like poop from the different animals. And there's another centipede. So we saw worms. I think there was a beetle scurrying. It was really fast. We saw centipedes underneath this log. Now, if you ever do any log flipping, of course, stay on the trail. So do it like just off the trail. But also, you have to make sure you put it back exactly where it was. We want to be really respectful of all these little critters in the ground. And so if we put the log back where it was, then they can continue on their little critter way wriggling around. When you look around in a forest, you might think, there's just like birds and squirrels, there's trees. We think about what's above ground, but we don't always think about below ground. And now we can think, looking at a forest, oh my gosh, between every branch, between or under the branches, under the leaves, under the logs, there is a whole world of little critters happening down there. And these critters, my friends, they are alive. They are alive. These are living parts of soil. So soil is made up of living things, and soil is made up of non-living things. We're talking about the soil habitat here. And the creatures that we saw in that video, the worms and the centipedes and beetles, those are all living parts of soil. I want to talk a little bit more about the non-living parts now. So I'm going to turn my screen around a little bit here and show you a couple of things. Okay. So when we're looking at non-living parts of soil, well, soil can have different non-living parts in it. I've got some gravel here, and that can be in soil for sure. What do you think this is? If you go to a beach, that's what's often on the beach. This is sand. So you can have sand in your soil. You can have silt in your soil. Silt is really, really fine material. So it's not grainy like sand. And what's the best is if your soil is loamy. Loam means it has a good mixture of silt and sand and clay, which we haven't talked about, but it means there's a good mixture of all that stuff. And if I show you over here, I have a soil profile. So let me just get the camera in the right angle. Dun, 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 dun. If this is the top layer of my soil, there are some leaves, there's a plant, you can actually see the root going down. And here's a mushroom growing, and there's some of the actual body of the mushroom down here. And this top layer is where a lot of those nutrients are we talked about earlier. That's where a lot of that decaying is happening. And that's where a lot of the living things are. So the worms and the beetles, they're mostly in that top area. You can also refer to that as humus. Everybody say humus on 3. 1, 2, 3. Humus. Yeah, not hummus, but it's spelled the same. So that's that really nutrient-rich part of soil. And as you go down, oh, there we've got a bit of a silty layer, and we've got some more grain, some larger stones. So in this soil profile, we can see that as we go down from the surface, there's less and less of the humus part, less and less of the organic material that has decayed in that soil. Okay, so back to our soil components. These are some of the non-living, so gravel, sand, silt, loam, which is kind of a mixture of the silt and sand and clay. And I wanted to ask you a question. This is a houseplant that I had that that has died. It didn't do very well, and that's a whole other story. I'm not going to get into that. But if we have a look underneath, what are these squiggly bits that are in the soil? See if I can get that in focus. That come down out from the stem of the plant. If you said roots, that's exactly what they are. So these roots, now this plant is dead, so these roots are dead too. But the roots of living plants, do you think they are, are the roots alive or are they dead? They are part of the soil. Are they a living or non-living part of the soil? They are living. So when we're thinking about soil being made up of living and non-living parts, there are lots of non-living parts that we just looked at, and we saw the living parts under the log, but the roots, they are also living parts of the soil. Now you might be saying, Raya, why does this matter? What difference does it make, all these different parts of soil? I'm going to put my phone down here so I can show you. The reason is because of water. And when you think about plants, so this plant I showed you back here, can it grow without water? I want to have you think to yourself, thumbs up if you think that the plant needs water to grow, thumbs down if it doesn't need water to grow, thumbs sideways if you're not really sure. So everybody do a little vote just on your own. Thumbs up if yes, plants need water to grow, thumbs down if they do not. Maybe your teachers are able to see you on the screen, maybe they're not, but you've all had your thought on, do plants need water to grow? Now, my answer is yes. Plants absolutely need water to grow, for sure. So water is a really important part of plant growth. Without water, not happening. So all these different parts of soil, well, they play a role in how the water moves through the soil. And let's see. If I was to pour water, I'm seeing it's actually starting to rain, through all these stones. So if we had soil that had a lot of these stones in it, I'm going to move some of these out of the way. Let's see what would happen. It goes right through, right through. So soil that has a lot of these stones is not going to hold a lot of water. And if there were roots trying to grow in here, well, do you think they'd get a lot of water if there's not a lot of water in the stones? Probably not. The stones do not absorb water really at all. If I was to pour water through sand, it would probably go right through. It's pretty grainy. So the sand doesn't really absorb water at all either. If I was to pour water through the loam, which is the mixture of sand and clay, I'll tell you, clay actually, if you pour water in it, if it's really compact, the water goes off. But once the clay gets wet, it can actually hold that water really well. So if I pour water into the soil here, well, let's see if it does go through or not. Let's see what happens. Make sure you're in the camera. It's absorbing in the soil. Oh, a little bit went through. But we can see the difference, right? We want the soil to hold on to water so that plants can grow. That is super important. So that's one reason why we're talking about all these different parts of soil, is because of how well they hold water. And if they can hold water, that means nutrients can also be held in the soil. Now, I wanted to tell you about, I get the camera back over to Raya here. Take me a moment. Hi, there we go. So we've talked about water moving through soil, but there's another important idea behind how water might move through soil. And this has to do with like how compact the soil is. So see if I can put my camera down again, right over here. Excellent. So if I had soil and it was really, really pressed together, really compressed, do you think that water can get into that soil? Not so well. Not if it's really packed together. But if the soil is looser, then the water can go and absorb into the soil. There is room for the water to move through the soil. And I like to do a little experiment sometimes, and I made up an experiment. Well, it's an experiment that actually happens, but I made it up for, I made up the tools for it from things I had at home. And one of the tools is an apple juice can, and I just cut the other end off, and I put this around it, this kind of rubber piece, so that if I'm pouring water down through the top, then it won't leak out the bottom. And the other part of my experiment is just something to hold some water. So I've got water in here, about 100 mils, and we are going to see how well water moves through different, oops, get my camera situated again, how water moves through soil that is more or less compressed. Will, can you show that picture of the trail that we have? So the trail, you can see on the right side of the screen, people are walking on the trail. They're pressing the soil down as they walk. They're not thinking about that, but that's what's happening. And so that would be our on the trail experiment. And then next to the trail where the forest is and the plants are growing, people don't really walk there so much. And so we can experiment and see if the soil is looser. Now, because I can't be in a park right now during stay at home, I am in the backyard, and we're going to kind of recreate. Will is going to pull up a video of what it would happen if we were on the trail. It's actually at the front yard. I filmed it earlier. So Will, if you can show that video of what happens when we try to pour water and have it absorb in the soil on the trail, that'd be great.
Video is coming up, Ryan.
Perfect.
Off at the walkway, kind of on the trail. We'll call it the trail. And so on the trail, I've got my DIY, that means do it yourself, infiltration tool. And I'm going to be holding the camera, if I can steady it. Let's see. It's a bit wobbly, guys. Okay. So I'm holding down the can, and what's happened here is that underneath, I've taped some rubber stuff to it to make a really good seal. Because when I pour water down here, I want to make sure it doesn't go outside the edges. I want to make sure it's all going down, down, down. So I have 100 milliliters of water, and I'm going to pour it down, and you are going to count with me to see how long it takes for this water to be absorbed down into the soil. Are you ready? Here we go. I'll start counting once I pour it. And kaplowy. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 9 Mississippi, 10 Mississippi, 11 Mississippi, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Is it even going down? 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. How long should we wait? 25, 26, 27, 28. Oh my goodness, 29, 30. Gosh, we could be here all day. So we can see that on the trail, the water is not really absorbing into the soil. I'm going to pull the can away. We'll see it where it goes. Bum-ba-dum. Oh, and it's been dribbling out this whole time a little bit. So water doesn't absorb very well on a trail. It kind of goes along the surface and goes down where it can find a little nook or cranny. So let's see what happens when we are off trail.
All right. So hopefully you can see me okay. I might be sideways. That's okay. You're not mostly going to be looking at me. And ladies and gentlemen, if you are doing the worksheet for on the trail, you can say that it took 30 plus seconds to absorb. It could have taken 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour. We didn't want to wait that long, but we can for sure say it took more than 30 seconds. So you can put 30 plus seconds. Now, we are off the trail where my can is, and it's right near where there are lots of plants growing. I'm going to pour the water in, and let's count all together how long it takes when we're off the trail for the water to go in, okay? I'm going to push the can down so it has a good seam. Here we go. Starting to count. Now, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Oh my gosh, it's gone. It's gone. That only took 3 seconds. So we can see, and Will, you can take the other camera off now. When we are off the trail, that water gets right in there. That is fantastic for plants to grow. And
You're still sideways, Raya, by the way.
I'm still sideways? Thanks, Will. Let me correct that. Dun, da, 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 dun, dun, dun. Sorry, guys. My phone is being funny on me.
If you just put it in portrait and then put it back to landscape, it should work. Perfect.
There we go.
We're good again.
Thank you. Couldn't find the button. All right. So what were we talking about? Oh, yes. That on a trail, I'm going to have this come down a little bit. The water doesn't really absorb very fast. And so if there's no water that's absorbing into the soil, can plants grow? Nope. Off the trail, where the soil is looser, then the water can absorb really nicely. And that means plants can grow. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is a little bit because we're trying to visit some parks if we can near our homes. And if you ever see a sign that says, please stay on the trail, this is part of the reason why. If we go off the trail, and like everybody does, then the park's not going to have any more plants growing because the soil's too smushed together. But I also wanted to mention it because you might have been talking about plants this year as well in grade 3. And I wanted to show you some of the roots that plants have and how that can help the water get down. So here we have, oh, before we do that, sorry. You guys have been sitting for a long time. Can I ask everybody to stand up? Stay at your computer, but stand up. And if I can back up a little bit here. And stretch, super, super tall. Stretch super tall. I'm getting off screen. Stand up, stretch super tall. Get your fingers up in the air. And think about how tall you are. Your fingertips are maybe at like 1.5 meters. Okay? Okay, so stay standing up. I'm going to show you some of these plants, like milkweed. Maybe you've heard of milkweed. The roots of milkweed can go down. How deep is that? 3.5 or 4 meters. New England aster is another beautiful plant with roots that go down to maybe 2.5 meters. Cup plant, really deep roots. So when you were reaching up, then you were at about 1.5 meters. And some of these plants, their roots go down double how tall you were with your fingertips pointed up. So why does that matter? Well, if the roots are growing down here, then it's helping to keep the soil loose, which helps the water get in, which helps other plants to grow as well. So we can see there's a lot of things happening together to help make soil healthy. Lots of living things in the soil, roots that grow down deep to help the soil have spaces for water and for living things to be in. I wanted to just point out one thing at the end here. We've got a plant that has really teeny tiny roots. They're only about 10 centimeters. And this plant that does not grow long roots, so it's not really the most helpful for soil, is turf grass. That's that very same grass that we have right here. Great for running around on, playing soccer on, and things like that. But the roots are super, super short, and they're not that helpful for making soil healthy. All right. Let me get my camera organized again. And we are going to visit. Oh, you can have a seat again. If you're still standing, you can take a seat again. I just wanted you to have a little bit of a stretch because it's a lot of sitting all day. But we are going to visit with some friends of mine that I brought along, a surprise guest. And these surprise guests, they actually are my roommates, and they help me to have healthy soil. I'm going to turn my phone around again, my camera. You see all the stuff in the yard. There we go. Can you guess what I have here? I just took the lid off. This is my vermicomposter bin. So I've put some eggshells and things like that in here, but you can imagine that in the wild, this soil would have leaves. We talked about this earlier, right? Leaves decomposing. We looked at the log flipping. What does all this decomposing? Like what helps to decompose things in the ground? I'm just going to put my camera down so I can show you with two hands who's in here. Let's have a look. So in my home, I don't put leaves in there. Those can decompose on the ground, but instead I put things like eggshells, and I put things like, oh, I think I have some here. I've got banana peels in here. And what is on the end of this? This is an apple core from an apple I ate the other day. And hopefully, there's one here. Oh, there we go. What I wanted to show you were the creatures that are helping to decompose my kitchen waste. And there was one in here, but it just scurried away, wriggled away. I don't like to disturb them too much, but I do want to show you because it's so cool when we can visit with these friends. So, do you see? I'll try to get some of the soil off. Sorry, buddy. Just for a little while. Thank you. You can see this beautiful creature that helps to eat up the apple cores and banana peels and eggshells and carrots and broccoli stems that I put in my vermicomposter bin. It's called a vermicomposter bin because vermi means worms, basically. And these are little red wiggler worms that do such a wonderful job to decompose what's in the soil and create compost. So compost is like soil that has a lot of nutrients in it. And if I look at, I thought I had another one here. So these apple cores that I pulled up, I just put in the other day. This one I put in a few days ago. Let's see what's happening here. So, that apple is totally gone. So this is what happens. After a few days, they eat up all that amazing, amazing food, and they turn it into soil. Hey, buddy, got another friend. And I'd love to show you these awesome creatures under the microscope. So I'm gonna, let's see what I can do here. I'm gonna put some soil on here and get these beautiful little worms, these red wigglers on there. And I think they like to have a little bit of water. So I'm just gonna, it's pretty dry right now where it is. I'm gonna pour a tiny bit of water on that lid there so they can move to it if they want to. And bring you over to my microscope setup. So this is where they're going. And I have a special tool that lets us see what is actually in the microscope on the screen. Oh, I don't want that reflection there. Okay, let me get this in focus. And maybe we can see the worms. Doesn't need the light. Maybe we can see the worms moving around and see how they move with the microscope. Oh, there's one. Look at how they move. They don't have any legs, but it's like they're so muscular with their special worm muscles. Oh, that's so cool. So these little wrigglers do such important things for the soil to keep it healthy, and they are also just super cool animals. Oh, thanks, worm friend. Oh my gosh, the worm is actually gone. I'll show you. It's going off of the plate. It's like, you know what? I want to be back home. Okay, I'll put you back in the bin. Thank you, worm. I'm not sure if I was able to find any, but I'm going to see if I can show you something else that's sometimes in that worm bin. And these are little teeny tiny white organisms. Sorry, I'm just taking a moment to try to find them. See if we can see any hopping around. Oh, good. I think we might have some here. So I've got some eggshells. You can see the massive eggshell that's not in focus there. It's not really massive. It just looks massive. But is there a little critter just near that eggshell? Let me see. Oh, I think I can find one for us. They like to hide really quickly, so sometimes it's hard to get them fast, but I saw one moving right around here. There he is. Look at that guy. That's called a springtail. And, oh, I wish I could show you closer. It's pretty hard with this system set up. But the springtail is a teeny, teeny, tiny white speck when I look at them in real life without the microscope. And in the winter, there's a different type of springtail. If you ever see little black things that look like insects in the snow, those are also springtails, but they're a different kind. And those ones and these ones are actually not insects. They're crustaceans, which is a whole other live stream. Oh, can I balance that? Okay. So I wanted to show you something else since I have the microscope set up. Although the springtails are pretty cool to look at. So we saw some red wigglers, some springtails. I wanted to show you what sand looks like under the microscope. We talked about sand earlier and how water might not move through it quite so, or might not be absorbed by it quite so well. And the reason is because it's like little teeny tiny grains. So when we think about that, well, remember that gravel I showed you before? Sand it's not gravel, but it's that same idea where water doesn't soak into each grain of sand. The water moves between the grains. And because the grains are relatively big, the water is not being absorbed. Oh, I think I see another critter on the edge of this, but that might not get in focus. Let's see. Nope, I don't think so. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm going to turn my camera around again. I've made a mess as I've been moving around the backyard here. I think you can see me. Okay, so we have talked about a whole bunch of different things. We have talked about how stuff breaks down to get into soil and turn into soil. And so things like leaves, banana peels, do we want healthy things in our soil, or are we okay with not healthy things like different chemicals from cleaning products or paints or car fumes, going into soil? We talked about non-living and living parts of soil. We've seen a bunch of critters. We talked about how water absorbs into the soil, and that can depend on what's in the soil. Is it gravel? Is it sand? Is it clay? Is it silt? Is it loam? We talked about how if soil is all compressed and squished together, is that going to be a type of soil that water can get into? And so how, as people, something we can do to help there be healthy soil for plants is we can make sure we stay on the trails when we go to parks, right? That's not too tricky. And that's like in a city. So in Toronto, that's more important than if you're in a place where people don't walk around outside as much, or like where there are fewer people. And when we looked at the critters just now, I wanted to point out that there are a lot more critters out there helping to break soil down. And Will, can you show that picture? I don't know if you guys know, it's actually Compost Awareness Week right now. I just found that out the other day. I didn't even know. So it's Compost Awareness Week. And if you look at this picture, then you can see that underneath the soil, this is their poster for the week. Underneath the soil, there is a whole lot of life, a lot of living things. There are snails and beetles and bacteria. There is so much that is helping to make the soil healthy. And so for teachers, if you are interested in checking out this poster more, it's actually available in like a whole bunch of different languages. I believe Jasmine or Carly can put the link in the chat to the compost Council of Canada, who are sort of hosting the Compost Awareness Week. You can check it out and you can download the poster just to like explore what's in the soil even further. But thinking about today, I know one of the questions on your worksheet, if you're doing a worksheet, is how many critters did we see? So we can do a little bit of a count. Maybe you remember more than I do, but flipping the log, we saw some worms. Those ones were called night crawlers, those types of worms. We saw centipedes. If you were able to see it, there was a beetle in that video too. And here with my vermicomposter worms, we saw some red wigglers. So that's a different type of worm. And do you remember the name of the little white, teeny tiny crustaceans that were moving around in the soil? Those were called springtails. So I think that's about 5 that we saw today in just a very short amount of time. And if you are able to go outside, maybe you can flip a brick or something over and see if there's any potato bugs or like pill bugs or other little creatures under the soil as well. Kind of a fun thing to do. Now, I know that there are some questions that have come up in the chat, and I wanted to mention, if you need, I'm going to take some time to answer those questions. If you do need to go at this point, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and hope that you enjoy exploring the world of soil further in your classroom. If you're able to stick around, then I can take some questions, and Will, you can come on screen and let me know what people have been asking. Is Will joining us? I can't hear him just yet. I might have a phone check issue, I'm not sure. One moment. Will, you might be on mute. Are you on mute? Or am I on mute for listening? Tech issue.
Ah, Raya, there we go. Now I'm not on mute.
Hey, there he is. I can hear him now.
I'm on mute. I was like, nah, Raya's on mute for sure. Perfect. So super excited. That was very soilful of you, Raya, to pass along all that information, or insightful of you. So we do have some questions that have came through, and some people are passing along some other questions too that our team has passed along. So we'll start off with some questions that we have. And one of them, I believe it's from Michelle. Can the root chart model be available? They're wondering about the root chart model. I'm not too much about the root chart model myself, though, Ryan. Can it be?
This one here, right? I think that's the one. So yes, it is actually available. I wonder if maybe Jasmine, if you can go to the metaway.ca, and it's somewhere on that website. If we can't find it and put it in the chat, then I'll put it in the description or in the comments afterwards. But it is available online, and it has even more plants than what I have here. It was actually drawn by one of our plant experts at the PRCA.
One of the many great colleagues that we get to work with. So it's a great resourceful tool. I remember when I saw it for the first time, you know, I myself, I'm 2 meters tall, and I just think about, you know, I'm pretty tall, but we look at some of the plant roots themselves, they go so much deeper than I initially anticipated or thought as well. So it's pretty amazing to get to see some of our native plants and why they're so much more important than, you know, traditional grass lawns. I'm looking at you, Dad, and loving your grass lawn. So Pat asked a question.
Grass lawns are fun to play on and fun to run around on. So,
yes,
you know, there's some human reasons why they're good, just not like nature reasons.
Thank you, Raya. And we have a question from Pat. How do plants absorb water?
How do plants absorb water? Yes. So we had talked about the roots that are at the bottom of, well, the underground parts of plants. And roots actually, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the answer, but just like how we have skin, we know trees have bark, and roots have a skin as well. And that skin, it allows for water to move through it. And so when the water moves through the root skin, I wish I had a good root to show you here, but I don't think I exactly do. Then a part of it is because at the leaf part of a plant, let me show you here. Okay, so here we have a tree, and the leaves are where water come out of the plant. So underneath the leaf, there are little teeny, 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 tiny, tiny, tiny holes that I would need a better microscope to look at than the one I have. And they're called stoma. And when the stoma open up, then water can leave the plant through the leaves. And by leaving the plant through the leaves, that actually creates a bit of a vacuum effect that travels all the way down the stem of the plant, down the trunk, into the ground, into the roots, and that draws water up. So water is moving through the plant, through the roots, trunk, stem, leaves, out to the air. It rains, it goes back to the soil, and then it goes up to the roots, stem, twig, leaf. And so that's kind of that's one part of the answer. Get my phone situated. One part of the answer of how roots take in water and nutrients too. Yeah, and nutrients too.
Yeah, it's, a big part of, how they're getting their nutrients, and, photosynthesis as well is a big part why they need those things and where they're getting their water from too. So we have another question here. Why are the bugs that we saw in the video hiding under the log? So why is that?
Yeah, a lot of insects, I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't say a lot of insects, but certain insects, because there are so many thousands of insects in the world. Certain insects that are the ones that live in soil, they really like dark spaces, and they like to go about their business just kind of on their own. If they're exposed, then maybe they might get eaten by a bird or a raccoon or something. Is like, oh, what a yummy insect. But if they're hiding under there, then they don't get eaten as much, and they can go about their business of decomposing living things like leaves and logs and sticks and banana peels. And so they like the dark, and they like to hide to not be eaten. And they are so tiny that they can move around in those tiny, tiny spaces underneath logs. It works for them.
Yeah. Their little home, it looks a bit different than ours, of course. And we're not going to judge them on that because, if I was a worm, I'd probably want to be under that log too. It looks like a nice safe space with all my other arthropod friends under there. So it looks like we have some other questions that are happening in here. Lisa is wondering, can you explain the red wigglers in your vermicompost giving nutrients to the soil? So they're wondering about that. Kind of how does it give nutrients, I guess, to the soil?
I'm going to get up for 1 sec and grab my little vermi bin and bring it right back to talk about it. 1 sec.
Yeah, perfect. And so keep coming in those questions, everybody. We have a team in the back end that are kind of answering some questions, and then we'll also take some of them too. So here's Raya back with her vermi friends.
My vermi friends. I love my vermi friends. Okay, so when I put a banana peel or something, do I still have my peel here? I put it on the ground. So if I put banana peel, I bury it in the bin underneath the soil. Oh, hi, buddy. Then these worms, I think I have to angle my camera down more, make this better. Okay, there we go. So I can dig the banana peel in. You don't want to have any of it covered or exposed because otherwise something else can develop on the top of the soil. And then these lovely, beautiful worms, well, they have to eat too, right? So, oh, here's a baby one. You're so cute. So where you might say, I want to eat a burger, or I want to eat salad like Raya, or you have different foods you love to eat, maybe chips. I do like chips too. Then worms, well, they'll eat food as well, but thankfully for us, they'll eat the stuff we don't want to eat, like the banana peels. So they eat. And sometimes you can actually see, I don't know if any of these worms will be able to show us, but sometimes you can see inside, oh, it's hard to show. Inside the worm, you can actually see when they're eating these food wastes, then as it goes through their body, it gets broken down into tiny, tiny bits. And when they, you guessed it, poop it out, well, then it has become really small bits of soil that we can now call compost that helps make the soil healthy by giving it little tiny nutrients that can then go into plants through the roots and become the leaves and flowers that we love so much. So basically what I have my hands all in here right now, this is worm poop. No joke, worm poop. Worm poop is awesome. So hopefully that answers the question. They eat and they poop.
And that's why too, right? I'm pretty sure I see a lot of worm poop after Some rainy times or earlier in the morning when I leave and look at my garden, sometimes I see like little mountains, it looks like, Raya, of soil. And I'm pretty sure that's kind of worm poop too. It might be. And a big part, within soil is, a lot of insect or kind of animal waste, and that is beneficial for the plants and other living things as well. If that didn't happen, well, there wouldn't be much nutrients in the soil for other living things to live. So really interesting stuff. We have another question here, and this one might be a bit tricky, Raya. And maybe you want to take a guess, and then I'll take a guess too, because why not, right? We're here to have fun. We're here to learn together. Is how many insects live in the soil? Now, it's a very broad question, so maybe we'll keep it to just the backyard that you're in right now. How many insects do you think are living in your space right now?
Yeah, so when you think about it, gosh, I don't know the answer. I don't have a number for you, but I know when we talk about beetles alone, is it 30,000 different species of beetle that live in the world? I think there are 300,000 species of insect in the world. I might have my numbers a little wrong, but we're talking hundreds of thousands. And so in the soil here alone, now I should say a centipede, for instance, that we saw in the video, not an insect. It's called a myriapod. You don't need to memorize that, but it's fun. Myria means many, pod means leg, so it has many legs. A worm is not an insect, right? Beetles are insects. So if we're talking about just insects, the number is lower, but if we talk about all these amazing creepy crawlies, I'm going to guess a couple of hundred of different types. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I would definitely guess a couple hundred in regards to different species that are in the area there. And I would guess, I want to say, 100,000 in regards to the individual number of actual, within all of the species number, just within a small little area. There's so many too that we can't see as well with our eyes. We may need other things like microscopes or a magnifier glass to get a better visual of them. Thinking of just ants themselves and how many thousands there are in a colony. Well, you could maybe have 2 colonies in 1 yard, right? Along with everything else going on. So it's pretty amazing what lives beneath the soil, right?
And the coolest insect that Raya loves, well, one of the most coolest insects that can live in the soil too are bees. There are some bees that live in families under the soil, and of course we need bees, we know that. So that's just one I wanted to point out, but that's another one.
Yeah. And are those the bees that give us honey, Raya?
No, actually. So the honeybees, they're actually from Europe. I love honey. But they're not actually from Ontario. The bees that live in the soil are mostly like bumblebees, for instance. There are different types of bumblebees that live in the soil, and they need to have space in the soil. So that's where loose soil is helpful too. And what they do instead of making honey is they help to make flowers. And sometimes those flowers can then help to make fruits. So the seeds from the flowers grow new plants, and the plants can grow fruit, and then we get flowers. And so it's a whole cycle, and bees are important pollinators for that.
Yeah, that's what it's called, right? Pollinators. Awesome. So we have another question here from Stacy Green. They're wondering, does the vermicomposter smell at all?
Ooh, good question, Miss Green. Miss Green and I were just emailing earlier. And I wanted to, by the way, because I was emailing with some other teachers too, I want to give a shout out, not just to grade 3s, but the grade 4s, grade 2s, any other grades that are watching as well. So the vermicomposter does not smell. If I bury my food scraps in it, then there's no smell issue. If I don't bury them, sometimes I'll see like a white kind of mold develop. Like if the apple is exposed or the banana peel, there might be this white kind of spiderwebby looking mold. Doesn't make it smell. I usually just cover that up with more soil and then it goes away. But yeah, it doesn't smell, which is great. A nice bonus. You can't put things like meat in it, like oils and fats. That would probably make it smell. But, yeah.
Yeah, your kind of fruits and vegetables is kind of what you're looking to put in there more, and specifically kind of what you were talking about. Awesome. So I think we have 1 or 2 more questions here that are rolling in. Our team in the back end, thank you very much for answering a lot of the other questions too. And we'll probably answer maybe 2 more questions. We have, how do different soil types form, or how do different types of soil form?
All right. So, one sec. Wanted to come around the corner to get my stones. So these stones, they're technically a little bigger than gravel. I did call them gravel before. So as stones and gravel and big rocks, they erode, they become smaller and smaller and smaller, then eventually, I guess that's what you would create sand. But if you have, in addition to the sand, you get leaves and sticks and things like that falling down into the space as well. And maybe a rabbit or a deer comes along and poops. Well, scat is really good at helping to create soil too. As things get you need a lot of things to make healthy soil, right? So different things. So we've got some stones, and you can even see, I'll show my hand after. So I'm rubbing my hand on the stones. My hand has got some of the powder from the stones, and that's basically little tiny erosion bits from the stone. So wind and water make the stones smaller and help the stones to create tinier bits. And then other pieces, like these organic things like leaves, once they fall down, then maybe some insects fly down and they're like, ooh, this looks like a good spot now that we have some leaves and things like that in there as well. I'm going to start living here. I'm going to start eating these leaves and other and flowers and petals that have fallen to the ground. I'm going to make poop. And then that poop ends up basically becoming that humus layer of the soil. So it takes a long time to go from like big rocks, but you also need other things to come into it to end up creating the soil. It's kind of a roundabout answer, but hopefully that made some sense.
Yeah, and there's even different types of, you can see on my image here, I have my little microscope actually looking at some sand, and there's different types of sand too. The big thing when we talk about this is it's not an overnight process that it happens. It takes millions of years, to get, some types of sand, really just from erosion, wind, the sun, everything, kind of beaten down on these non-living things, and even, sometimes, these once living things that are now dead too. So some really great questions that we have here. I'm just going to double check our chat here, make sure there's no final questions as we're wrapping up to about 8 to 3 here. So I don't want to take, I know we've had such great questions and everything like that. I think, Raya, any final words, thoughts before we close for today?
I just want to encourage you, if you are able to, if you happen to have a yard, then get your hands dirty. This is gardening season. It's a great time to explore the soil, and don't be afraid to get some of that soil on your fingers and enjoy. And think about when you're walking outside, what's under your feet? Maybe there's a sidewalk, but what's under that? Look around for plants that might have deep roots going down into the soil, helping to keep the soil loose and helping for water to absorb into it. Lots of great exploration with soils. Thank you so much for joining us. In 2 weeks, we have a session for your grade 9 friends. So if you have any older siblings in grade 9, you can let them know that they can let their teachers know on sustainable ecosystems. And thank you very much for joining us today. It's been really, really wonderful having you.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Raya, for so much information today. We had a lot of fun. And thank you, everybody, again. We hope to see you around. Enjoy the rest of the day.